This is Marco Reus.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellow Wall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 521 of the Yellow Wall Pod. I'm your host Stefan Watzke, and today we will talk about the members assembly that voted Hans-Joachim Watzke to become the new club president. We'll also talk, of course, a little bit about the Champions League 4-0 win against Villarreal, and of course we will talk about the Bundesliga, where Dortmund recently had a soul-crushing 3-3 draw against VfB Stuttgart, and of course looking ahead, there are back-to-back games against Bayer Leverkusen, one in the Bundesliga, I think tomorrow, right? And then the other one in the DFB Pokal, which will be, of course, a knockout game. For all that, and probably not much more, since we don't have that much time, I'm joined by Lars Perlman. Hello, Lars. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. Happy Thanksgiving, I suppose, if that's something you still say on Fridays.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But thank you either way.
Yeah, I'm doing fine. The days are blurring into each other a little bit because there's so much happening at Borussia Dortmund, but obviously that makes for decent podcasting opportunities.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, apologies that we couldn't crank out an episode a little sooner because, of course, it's just alluded to a lot of things happen. But yeah, we were a bit of Thanksgiving stress. We did a turkey and a ham. And first time I ever was involved in making a Thanksgiving turkey, and it actually came out quite decent, even though my take is that a turkey itself is pretty mid usually, but yeah, no, it was a success, and we definitely had a lot of food yesterday and family over, and yeah, I think we'll be eating leftovers for the next 2-ish days or so. But yeah, that is not the topic of this podcast. The topic of this podcast is Borussia Dortmund, and there is a lot of turmoil going on. Lars, the members' assembly, I think is probably where we should start. I don't know if it's the most consequential thing out of the last things that happened, but I guess per definition it is. If you have a new club president. Now, just for the sake of people understanding what the new role is for Hans-Joachim Watzke, Lars, would you mind to explain his previous role as basically sort of the head of the publicly traded company versus what his current role is as the actual president of the club?
I mean, that alone is probably worth more time than we have, but trying to be concise, as you said, the professional football department, let's say, is obviously publicly traded, and that is what Hans-Joachim Watzke was the CEO of for a little more than 20 years. And then at the members' assembly, he stepped down from that role in order to become club president, and that means the entirety of the club, so including the pro football side of things, but also other departments of the club. So let's say the table tennis teams, women's football, which isn't fully professional yet, women's handball, which is professional, or the youth departments. So basically the entire club is obviously owned by the members, let's say, and he's now the president, which means he doesn't really have much of a say, at least on paper, in terms of actual decision making, at least as it pertains to the Bundesliga team, which is obviously what most people who listen to this podcast will care about most. He's more of a figurehead now. I think a lot of people should probably think about what they noticed of his predecessor, Reinhold Luno, who I should say. I think most of our listeners would not be able to pick out of a police lineup, because it's not like he had the most public profile. Obviously, Hans-Joachim Watzke is more in the public eye, as well because he holds a lot of other positions at the DFB, DFL, UEFA, all that good stuff. So I'm sure people who don't like Hans-Joachim Watzke's media personality will still be annoyed by him, but focusing just on Borussia Dortmund, he's basically now a figurehead, someone mostly for representative purposes, politicking with, city council and the mayor and taking care of a lot of things that are outside of the scope of the Bundesliga side. So I think we should also say that his successor in that regard is Carsten Kramer, who was already obviously part of the management team for marketing, distribution, and internationalization, if that's even a word. He doesn't hold the same title as Hans-Joachim Watzke. He's the speaker of the, management council, let's say, whereas Hans-Joachim Watzke was head of, but at the end of the day, it's pretty much the same role. So there's going to be a bit of an upturn in terms of, public appearances from Carsten Kramer, which, again, a lot of people will be annoyed by because he doesn't really speak like someone born and bred in football and more like a, corporate identity. But I mean, that was pretty obvious from the start that nobody would be replacing Hans-Joachim Watzke in, the exact same role.
Do you think Carsten Kramer will be a heavy influence on Dortmund's sporting success or lack thereof?
Not more or less so than he has been in the past, because he's been part of the CEO team since, I think, 2018. He's obviously been very important in getting Dortmund to where they are financially. They are a powerhouse, obviously not among the richest of the rich clubs in Europe, but we should always take things in perspective. Dortmund are by far the second richest club in Germany, for example, in terms of, revenue, but also the wages they can pay and all that. So seeing as he had those roles before, I don't understand necessarily why anything would change in that regard, but maybe his style, which presumably is a little less confrontative than Hans-Joachim Watzke's, maybe that conduces itself to, more smooth sailing, let's say, but sometimes you also need that guy who, pounds the table for something he strongly believes in, so I don't know.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. I'm a little bit skeptical, but let's talk a little bit about the vote, maybe. It was a hybrid vote, so that meant that not only the people in attendance at the Westfalenhalle could vote, but also people could vote online. And Watzke, at least in the first vote, because I think there are like 3 rounds of voting in the first vote, would have lost the vote if only the people present in the Westfalenhalle would have voted. But since it was a hybrid vote and people online also voted, he did manage to get a majority. But 59% is not a high number of confidence, especially if you compare it to recent votes. Dr. Reinhold Luno, for example, and I think Dr. Raubal, not the doctors, they all pass way above the 90% threshold, 95, maybe 99%, etc. So, Lars, what is your explanation for the low confidence in Hans-Joachim Watzke as the club's president?
Well, first of all, I'm kind of annoyed, not necessarily at you, Stefan, but at some of the other people who talk about this, because when they say that Watzke would have lost the vote if it wasn't for, the hybrid voting, it's not like, people didn't know about this before. So a lot of people might have come to the assembly if they hadn't had the ability to vote online. So it's just people are always calling for more democratic processes, and then, something happens which is invariably more democratic because more people can take part in the vote, and then that's still not enough. So I don't know, it's kind of bugging me.
It's easily the right thing to do. You want to have as many people voting as you possibly can, I guess, because that's how democracy works, at least in my view. the higher the voter turnout, the better.
The problem for me is just people want to have their cake and eat it too, basically. So
I know what you mean.
I just don't really understand that logic necessarily. But nevertheless, I think it's interesting. Maybe before the assembly, us journalists were talking and kind of having not a bet, obviously, but like a pool in terms of what do you think the result's going to be? And most of us were, in the, let's say 70 to 85 or so margin. So still not a brilliant result going by what you mentioned earlier, the previous years, but a strong vote of confidence or strong enough vote of confidence after, the last few months of, I don't know, turmoil, if that's the right word. But, with every minute of the very long assembly on Sunday, the mood, especially among the fans and members in the Westfalenhalle, got worse and worse as it pertains to the current leadership, excluding obviously Reinhard Luno, so talking about Watzke, and also Lars Ricken, Carsten Kramer, Thomas Dress, so the pro side, let's say. And then when they finally came to a vote, which took an agonizing amount of time, I was going like, I wouldn't be shocked if it took a second round of voting, and it's definitely going to be below 60%. And obviously that was pretty much nailed on because it was 59%. Definitely not a great result. I think most members are probably happy that it didn't come to a second round of voting, even the ones who didn't vote for Watzke. I don't think anyone was under the assumption that the assembly was going to end with anyone else other than Watzke being president. So it's better for Dortmund to not go through another round of voting. That would just have been a fairly poor sign for the outside world. And I think a lot of people are quite happy that Watzke has this bad result hanging over him, because it kind of tells him that he needs to change the way he approaches a lot of things and be more open to, member opinions and topics that the membership and fans care more about than, investors or sponsors.
Yep, that is, I think, a good takeaway. Any other takeaways you have from this assembly?
Mostly how incredibly long it was. Like, I left after 11 hours and they were like, I think 2/3 done, because I didn't stick around for, the changes to the bylaws and all that stuff. I would have liked to, but it was just too long a day. Obviously Sunday after a match day, so a lot of tired faces among the fans, journalists, the team itself. Like, it wasn't a great day just to sit around for such a long time. And obviously the most egregious aspect of that was the hybrid voting, because for whatever reason, for every single vote, and even if it was something obvious like voting Norbert Dickel to be an honorary member of the team, of the club, they gave everyone voting online 5 minutes to do one click. So every single decision took way too long. Obviously then counting the votes also took very long time. So it was just a drawn out process. And obviously we should mention that the entire assembly started an hour late because they were having trouble with people both in the Westfalenhalle and online, getting them up to speed in terms of processing their participation in the assembly. So it should start at 11. It started at 12 and then it took forever. So I think Hans-Joachim Watzke was president shortly before 7 p.m. And that was, the eighth topic on the docket, let's say. And you could just tell after like the first 2 or 3 items on the docket that the entire thing was going to take so long, and that kind of just sucked the air out right out of the building.
Yeah, from what I've read, there were a lot of people with good remarks, constructive criticisms, etc., and that the Blasricken speech was not something that's instigating a hope in the hearts of Dortmund fans that sporting success is just around the corner. But I don't think we have the time right now to go into more detail. Lars, let's switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about the 4-0 win against Villarreal, a game that I guess wasn't the most exciting one, but I think from a Dortmund perspective, still very important that A, they kept a clean sheet, and B, in the end it was relatively decisive for them to and get out of it pretty much unscathed, because I don't think there were many injuries coming out of it. So that now means Dortmund have scored 4 goals in 4 out of 5 games in the Champions League. They have scored 17 goals in total. That is just 2 fewer than in the Bundesliga as of right now. And of course, they are now in 6th place in the overall standings of the league phase. And the 3 remaining games are against Bodo Glimt, Tottenham, which is away, and then at home to Inter. So, last, first of all, why is it that Dortmund have scored, I think the average is now 3.4 goals per game in the Champions League. How or why is it so that they almost have the exact same scoring record in much fewer games in the Champions League compared to the Bundesliga? Is there an obvious explanation for that, or is this just variance?
I think we should go a little bit further in terms of statistics, because it's actually even more interesting to me. In the 5 Dortmund Champions League games, there have been 28 goals. In 11 Bundesliga games, there have been 29. And obviously, Dortmund have 2-3 all draws in the Bundesliga. So it's not like all the games have been, 1 or 2 goal affairs. Obviously, we asked the players and Sebastian Kehl after the game, and nobody really has an explanation other than, maybe the games are a bit more open. I think there's something to that, because obviously teams that make it into the Champions League usually like to have the ball a little bit, because they have to be dominant in their respective leagues. Obviously to a varying degree, but I think the general theory probably holds. So there might be a little bit more space for Dortmund, but then that was definitely not the case against Villarreal, because for whatever reason, the Spanish side were basically disinterested in having the ball for the entirety of the first half. I think after 17 or so minutes, I looked at the scoreboard and Dortmund had 71% possession, which against a Spanish side, I suppose is somewhat rare. And then, especially when talking about the Villarreal game, we have to just mention sort of luck. Like the first goal by Guirassy, he scores from, was that even 50 centimeters out? And obviously Waldemar Anton did somewhat handle the ball, so I'm pretty sure there would have been an argument to be made for that goal to be waved off. And then
I personally would have chalked it off.
Obviously I didn't really see it during the game, and then I think it was the kind of thing where if he'd not given the goal, live or during the live play, then he wouldn't have given it after VAR review. But I'm not sure that necessarily you had to chalk it off after reviewing it. So, and then obviously the even more lucky one was the second goal, because it was a trifecta of a penalty. It was even, I don't know, is quadfecta a word? Because it was a penalty, a red card, and then the penalty was saved, but Guirassy scored the rebound. So it was 4 lucky instances for Dortmund in a way. And then obviously...
Well, 3. The penalty being saved is not a lucky instance for Dortmund.
Yeah, but he got it back. So that's a goal.
Yeah, but that's the 3rd instance.
Yeah, but he still had to score. Nevertheless, it's from that point on, like, the game was decided. And I think Villarreal, kind of looking at probably the Champions League table and the La Liga table, kind of decided, this is not our year in Europe. Let's make sure we are coming back next year, because obviously they are 3rd in La Liga, only 3 points behind league leaders Real Madrid. And in the Champions League, after 5 games, they have 1 point and recently lost away to Paphos on Cyprus. So it kind of felt like Villarreal basically gave up after the second goal. Then another lucky goal for Adeyemi, who knew nothing about scoring that because the ball hit his, shin or knee or whatever.
In real time, it looked like such an amazing finish, but then you see the replay and you're like, skill.
From where I was sitting, the only amazing thing about that goal was Julian Brandt's sort of assist, because I could tell that Adeyemi didn't really score that himself. So long story short, it was obviously a convincing win in the end, but if one looks beyond the surface, it was kind of lucky in the way it came together for Dortmund, and maybe that's also kind of the story of their Champions League season in terms of goal scoring, because obviously they also scored somewhat luckily against Bilbao. When you remember Sabitzer hitting Guirassy, they scored 4 to Copenhagen. They had a penalty against Juventus. Juventus goalkeeper made a mistake for one of those goals as well. So I think we should not overanalyze 5 games in the Champions League, but it's definitely interesting that they seem to be turning things on a little bit more in terms of how creative they are, and obviously their goal scoring record speaks for itself.
I mean, it is not a new observation that this team in particular just plays with more energy, with more passion, however you want to describe it, or just takes the Champions League games a little bit more seriously than the Bundesliga. I think that's no secret, and it's something we've discussed before, and I think it's evident again this season. So I think this is just a part of it, that they just play a little bit harder, just ready to invest a little bit more in the Champions League games than they are in the normal league matches. Make of that what you will. But yeah, right now in the Bundesliga, if we and I agree with all of your takes, so I don't think there's much more to discuss other than no, we'll just move on. Anyway, so as I said in the intro, a 3-3 draw against Stuttgart was pretty soul crushing. Dortmund right now are in 4th place. Are there any things you want to discuss about that Stuttgart game, or do you want to sort of move right past that and talk about the Leverkusen games? A little bit up to you.
I mean, I don't know if soul crushing is necessarily the right word. I would just say...
well, I was devastated, so...
I mean, I was devastated because obviously Dortmund scored late themselves, so that was already changing the entirety of, your work. And then they conceded the 3rd goal. And obviously, to me, it felt like Stuttgart were going to score 4.
That's Pollmann checking in with the most selfish point of view. It's like, well, it ruined my work, so who cares about anything?
This is what people come to expect from when talking to Dortmund journalists, which you yourself used to be one. I don't know if you still consider yourself.
No.
I mean, to be honest, I fully expected Stuttgart to score a 4th goal, and I'm not sure that wouldn't have been warranted because I felt Stuttgart were much the better side, especially, the first 30 or so minutes before Dortmund scored the opener. Just the way Stuttgart circulated the ball was so much better than what Dortmund does. It was almost a bit problematic to see. But then I guess we can look at it from a positive side, that Dortmund still find ways to not lose these games when the opponent is kind of better. Like the same happened in a way against Leipzig. I think Leipzig were closer to scoring the winner there. And, maybe moving forward to Leverkusen, I think Stuttgart, Leipzig, Leverkusen, maybe not Frankfurt at the moment, but at the moment of the cup game, because they had better personnel available at that time. I would lump those all together with Dortmund in that group, far behind Bayern in terms of who finishes 2nd to 5th, maybe 6th. Obviously, the season in the Bundesliga might have the opportunity to get the 5th place back for Champions League, which would be very good news for all those teams, because obviously one more place means one fewer team on the outside. And maybe it is the positive that Dortmund find ways not to lose these games, because a lot of times over the last few years, especially in the first halves of the season, they would have lost probably this game against Stuttgart and the game against Leipzig before.
Yeah, I mean, if you just look at the goals scored statistic in the Bundesliga so far after 11 match days, Bayern Munich have a whopping 41 goals that they've scored, and Frankfurt and Leverkusen are tied second best with 27. So that delta itself is huge. But yeah, comparing even that to Dortmund, I mean, Dortmund have 19 goals scored. It's a bit of a gap between Dortmund and Leverkusen in terms of offense. Of course, Dortmund are the second best defense, at least in terms of goal conceded, with 10. Meanwhile, Leverkusen sit at 15. But it is, of course, interesting that Bayer Leverkusen, with all the turnover they had, of course, Xabi Alonso went to coach Real Madrid. They hired Ten Hag and then very quickly fired him. And now, of course, their manager is Kasper Hjulmand, who is apparently doing a pretty decent job, considering that Bayer Leverkusen now in the table are ahead of Dortmund. Something especially Matthias would have not foreseen, since I think he was, from the three of us, the most confident that Leverkusen would have a bit more of a difficult season. But right now, they are doing pretty well. Dortmund, of course, would be doing much better had they not choked away 4 points in the last 2 match days. Because if you concede in stoppage time, I think it's warranted to use that terminology, even though, of course, Dortmund also did score very late against Stuttgart. So they would have been also lucky to win that game in more than one sense, because, as you also just alluded to, VfB Stuttgart are the much better team right now. More well coached, let's say. Lars, going into those Leverkusen games, I'm honest, I think right now there is a bit of I don't know if I want to say disharmony, but I think there are a couple more question marks about Niko Kovac, the things he's saying to the media versus what other players are saying. I think his comments about Maximilian Bayer after the Stuttgart game was something that raised a lot of eyebrows among the fans, where yeah, I think Maxi Bayer said also things along the lines of this being very soul crushing, and Niko Kovac waving it off a little bit, and trying to put things into perspective, but maybe a perspective that people don't want to hear about. But I do believe if Dortmund lose to Leverkusen in a way that demonstrably shows that Leverkusen are a much better team and then also crash out of the cup, I think the mood is going to be a little bit more sour than this right now. Since you're a little bit closer to how things are going on the ground than I am, a tiny little bit closer, what is sort of your vibe check going into those two very important games?
It's 7 kilometers to the stadium for me, Stefan. I don't know how many for you.
A little bit more.
Yeah,
a couple more.
Depends on the traffic, I guess.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely a bit of a weird mood around the club. I think the members' assembly kind of played into that, because obviously for a lot of fans who are important in terms of setting the mood, that wasn't a great day. Just how the officials handled their criticism and all that. I've heard from a few people that right now they're just not that excited about going to the stadium as they usually are. Obviously that might change, if they get a big win here or there, which they are chasing because they haven't beaten a top level side this season. The same was true for Leverkusen before the game against a much rotated Erling Haaland less Manchester City side on Tuesday. So
must be nice.
Just in those terms, and obviously this being a home game for Leverkusen, I'm guessing most people would agree that Leverkusen are slightly favorited in this game.
I mean, it did help out Dortmund though in the Champions League that Leverkusen took points of Manchester City, so we shouldn't be mad.
I don't know that it necessarily does, because there's enough space for both Dortmund and Manchester City in the top 8. And I don't even know if, we should be asking top 8 from Dortmund, but let's not get back to the Champions League right now. So it's definitely a bit of a weird mood. And I mean, if they were to lose twice against Leverkusen, then definitely the mood would be much worse, because it would mean the one realistic shot at a trophy is gone. Once again, gone before the turn of the year, which has been the case too often over the last few seasons. And I'm pretty sure, as you sort of alluded to, that if that were to come to pass, and then they are having a difficult home game against Hoffenheim on Sunday as well, it's not like those are guaranteed 3 points either. I'm pretty sure that there's going to be a bit of a discussion about Niko Kovac's job security, because that's just how things go at a club like Borussia Dortmund. But as I mentioned earlier, they are kind of finding ways not to lose these games. And if we want to consider, Leverkusen as, a double act, let's say, then the second game in the cup is in Dortmund. They came away from Frankfurt with a win, or a win after penalties is sort of a win at least. That was a big victory for them, even if not necessarily against one of those elite teams, which I don't know if Leverkusen are one of those, because obviously the turmoil in that team is quite considerable. I think they've lost 7 of the starting 11 that faced Dortmund on the penultimate match day last season, plus Xabi Alonso. So it's basically a whole new team. So I'm more optimistic that they aren't going to lose both of these games. And honestly, given that the Bundesliga is still going for a few months, I would much rather lose Saturday, win Tuesday than any other combination. Outside of winning both of those games, I guess, but that wasn't my point.
Yeah, I hear you. I think there is an emphasis about the German Cup in Dortmund this season for sure. I think it was also mentioned at the Members' Assembly that we're hoping to hoist the cup at the end of the season. And yeah, it's obviously not an easy draw, having to go through Eintracht Frankfurt and then Leverkusen are not going to make things easier, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be impossible to not have to beat Bayern to win the cup this season. I don't know if Dortmund will be so lucky to avoid Bayern Munich in the cup and still somehow win it. I think Bayern Munich have embarrassed themselves enough recently to take this competition a little bit more seriously, and they have so much cushion now in the Bundesliga that they can probably also shift their focus a little bit. But obviously not a Bayern podcast, so who gives a crap? But yeah, what I find very interesting about Leverkusen, for example, is that they are, at least in terms of Grimaldo, who to me is one of their biggest difference makers, not just someone who plays, who kicks a mean free kick, but just in general someone who can really create on the left side, and is such a big influence just in the attacking department. Dortmund tried something similar with young coach, but it's just not coming off the same way. I personally believe that Dortmund, if they could upgrade their fullbacks, would be a much more competent team overall. I think Riasson and Svensson are decent players, but I don't think neither of them are real international class. And I think if they were to lift that position up, it would already make a big difference, because right now I don't think other teams have to really match plan for those two the same way you would have to match plan for Grimaldo and Bayer Leverkusen, to be honest. But yeah, my question to you, Lars, is what have Leverkusen done so well with all this turnover to be right now above Dortmund in the table, or is it just because Dortmund have lost too many points recently? I mean, Dortmund are also just 2 points of Hoffenheim, as there are 9 points of Bayern, and they're I think 2 points better right now than they were at the same time after 11 match days in the previous season.
I would kind of just say that Leverkusen still have a very good squad. Like, a lot of the transfers they made in the summer were at least very interesting. Getting a ton of young talent in. Maybe some of them haven't really come off yet. But the general level of their squad is still just very high. And I will also say, at least, especially in hindsight, that they made the right choice in not sticking out things with Erik ten Hag, even though they caught a lot of flack for firing a head coach 3 games into his tenure.
Well, I was then one of the few people praising it because I juxtaposed it with Dortmund hanging on to Nuri Sahin for way too long.
Yeah, but there's a difference between hanging on, after the winter break when things were clearly not going to work out for Nuri Sahin and Dortmund, and doing it after 3 match days. Like, there's quite a bit of middle ground there, which most teams usually fall, and Leverkusen obviously did the decisive thing and it worked out for them. I don't necessarily know that Kasper Hjulmand is the head coach for the next 5 years at Leverkusen. It's not like he has the highest profile. He failed at, Mainz in the Bundesliga before, and then had a pretty decent run with the Danish national team, but nothing outrageous. So I don't really know how much, he deserves in terms of praise when it comes to their relative success. I mean, they are very similar in terms of their record to Dortmund. Obviously, the statistics in terms of goals scored, for example, you already mentioned, but they've also lost 2 games against, the highest level of competition in terms of losing to Bayern and PSG under Hjulmand, which is comparable to Dortmund losing against Bayern and Manchester City. The Man City games.
Well, Dortmund have not conceded 7 goals this season. I think that's something that Leverkusen did, and it's something that you can't just wipe away.
Yeah, and we can't really equate the 2 Manchester City games. Obviously, Dortmund lost at Man City 4-1, and Leverkusen went there and won 2-0, but they made 10 changes, and Erling Haaland didn't play, so it's not like they faced anywhere close to the full-strength Man City team. But still, you have to always, come away with a win first and not just talk about it. So they definitely deserve some credit there. But at the end of the day, I think a lot of times this is kind of this, the grass is always greener. I think the situations are very much comparable. Dortmund are in a better position in the Champions League by quite a distance. And I mean, given that they have 2 home games left, Dortmund should probably aim for top 8, which would be a pretty astounding accomplishment for a club of Dortmund size, which is definitely not one of the 8 biggest clubs in Europe or in the Champions League. And
I'm sure the front office won't derive the wrong takeaways from this at all, but continue.
I mean, it's actual results. I don't know how much room for interpretation that stuff leaves. And then obviously Leverkusen are 1 point ahead of Dortmund in the Bundesliga. So,
I mean, you just said how lucky Dortmund were in the Champions League, so there's room for interpretation.
Yeah, but luck always evens out, as you know, Stefan. So over 8 matches, maybe it doesn't.
And always luck is skill, as we say.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much people do like this sort of debate, but to me, at the end of the day, the results speak for themselves. And when Dortmund make it to the final in 24, the quarterfinal in 25, and then however long they are going to be in the Champions League this season, I would say that Dortmund are probably pretty good in the Champions League. If people want to argue with that, that's fine. I think to just, sum it up, Leverkusen and Dortmund are in very similar positions. I think probably Leverkusen have the more exciting side because there's a lot of young talent in that team. But I don't know that Leverkusen have a Nico Schlotterbeck in their squad, for example. So a player who could arguably play for any club in the world right now. Maybe Grimaldo is that, but I don't know. I think they are very comparable, and that should make for 2 pretty evenly contested matches.
All right, so we don't have much time, but are there any key matchups, things that Dortmund should be wary of? I mean, we've talked a lot about Grimaldo, but then again, he is like the tight goal scorer in the Bundesliga. He has scored 8 goals, I think, alongside Patrick Schick. anything that Dortmund really need to watch out for? Any tendencies that Leverkusen have that could exploit Dortmund's tendencies?
Do you honestly think, Stefan, that I can tell you about Leverkusen's tendencies?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe you watch a lot more Bundesliga than I do nowadays.
How would I do that? I'm always working, basically. I don't know. I've watched, I think, one Leverkusen game in full this season. That was the one against Frankfurt because it was on the Friday evening.
All right, so maybe personnel update then.
Yeah.
Who is available?
Everyone but Niklas Süle and possibly Maximilian Bayer. The press conference was today on Friday, but the final training session took place afterwards, and that was where they were going to test Maximilian Bayer's. It sounded like he was going to be available at least for a place on the bench, so it's only Niklas Süle out. So it's going to be another round of rotation, I'm sure. It's basically pointless to try and predict, Niko Kovac's lineups because they have so few injuries. They can decide based on, matchups and all that. There are a few tendencies for Dortmund, which I find interesting. For example, Marcel Sabitzer hasn't started in the Bundesliga since Bayern, which I wasn't necessarily aware of before looking it up. Joe Bellingham started 3 Bundesliga games in a row, so maybe that's sort of a pointer, but as I said, it's kind of irrelevant to speculate because there's going to be 4 or 5 changes as there always seem to be.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be interesting to see how many changes there are between those 2 games itself. But I think this is the perfect time to just say, okay, we'll learn about Bayer Leverkusen as we play them twice. And we'll see how much animosity will be created by those 2. That's the one thing I really like about watching NBA playoff games also, or just those best of 7 series that teams just really learn how to hate each other over the time of playing them each other so much.
And you could also say that over the last few seasons, Dortmund and Leverkusen have always had these somewhat heated games. I think Leverkusen have actually beaten Bayern more than Dortmund over the last 2 or 3 seasons. Obviously, Dortmund kind of ruined Xabi Alonso, Jonathan Tah, and Florian Wirtz's final home game last season when they lucked their way into a 4-2 win in which Gregor Kobel was by far the best player on the pitch, which is saying something with that scoreline. And you could also kind of make the point that this is as close to a derby as Dortmund get these days because it's obviously just, an hour by car down the Autobahn 1 here in Western Germany, whereas
every fiber just in my body just protested with this thing, but you're technically right.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. With Schalke still in the 2nd division, Bochum being relegated, there are no real derbies for Dortmund.
Yeah, technically they're like 5-10 kilometers closer to Dortmund than Cologne are.
Seeing as I travel down that road quite a bit, I can tell you that it's a little bit more. And obviously Dortmund and Cologne are connected by a fan friendship, even though it's not an official one, I don't think. Whereas Dortmund and Leverkusen kind of on the opposite scale of, the 50+1 debate, for example.
Yeah, Dortmund do believe that Bayer Leverkusen should not exist. So
at least not in the Bundesliga, at least, yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, all right. That was a fun little podcast. Thank you very much, Lars, for agreeing to this more spontaneous this time in terms of scheduling, because basically what happened is I opened my eyes this morning and I thought, why not record a Yellow Wall pod? So... here we are. Thank you everyone for listening, and of course, since in the spirit of Thanksgiving, I'm very grateful that you A, found the time, and B, still do this regularly with me, as regularly as we can these days. So thanks again, Lars. I hope you enjoy those 2 games, and we'll talk about those on the flip side. Until then, enjoy your weekends. Goodbye.